Hello, I'm Mary Dixon, and I'm happy to partner with the graduate school at UTSA for the Career Builder session preparing for job interviews. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. I have a PhD in Communication Studies from the University of Texas at Austin. I also have over 20 years of experience teaching communication skills to college students. Finally, I spent 3 years as a professional recruiter. Let's look at today's outcomes. In this session, we'll learn three key components for interviewing. First, identifying ways to prepare. Second, understanding the best practices for the interview itself. And third, knowing ways to follow up. First, let's discuss preparing for your interviews. Before you interview with any organization, you need to gather as much information as possible, and that means doing research. It's important to do your research for the organization, the people, and the culture. Let's start with the organization. Thanks to the internet, we can find out all types of information about companies and organizations. But you have to know where to look. Of course, you should always pay attention to the company's website and their social media accounts. But beyond that, it's important to dig a bit further. Networking sites like LinkedIn can give you information about people. Company rating sites like Glassdoor can tell you more about the experiences of people who've worked there. And of course, using Google can help you find news, photos, and other information about the organization. When you start your research, your initial focus should be on the organization itself. Companies expect candidates will have spent significant time on their website getting to know them. First, make sure you understand their product, service, or expertise. What do they claim to be their competitive edge? Where do they specialize? Second, have they been in the news? What is the focus of the stories? Are they growing? Have they done something noteworthy that you could bring up in the interview? Third, look at who they serve. Who are their clients? Who are their customers? Are you one? Finally, get to know any major competitors. Who are the other people in the industry? The second type of research is focused on the people in the organization. The best place to start is by looking for information on the person interviewing you. Check on LinkedIn to see if you can find their profile. You can also Google them to find other information, but be careful not to mix them up with people who have similar names, or to look for information that's not professionally relevant. You can often find them on the company's website. Additionally, you should look at the company's website to see who the key leaders are. If they're mentioned in the interview, it can be helpful to understand their role in the organization. Finally, check to see if there are people you may know. They might be able to put in a good word for you or tell you more about the organization. And if you went to school, you might find that they were alumni and might be able to share some information and insight. The final thing you should look for is information about the organizational culture. By culture, we mean what is the environment in which you would work day to day. It isn't always easy to spot a company culture. When looking for clues, ask yourself these types of questions. Is there a company where people seem to have fun? Or is it a company that's more serious? Is it a competitive environment? Or are they supportive of each other and work in teams? Do you see a casual dress code? Or do they have an attitude that's more conservative? Is it a diverse group of people? Or do they all seem similar to one another? Asking these questions before you apply can help you make important decisions about how you present yourself. So, how can you tell an organization's culture before your visit? Start by looking at any mission, vision, or values shared on the website. What language do they use to describe themselves? Are they innovative, customer focused, concerned about employee welfare? Then look at sites like Glassdoor for reviews about the organization. What do former employees say? Remember to take reviews with a grain of salt, but if there's a lot of people sharing the same basic components or complaints, then you want to pay attention. Third, look at photos posted on LinkedIn or in the organization's website or in the news. How do the employees dress? Are they diverse? What is the image the organization portrays? Once you've prepared for your job interview, the next step is to follow best practices for impressing your interviewers. They say you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and this is especially relevant for interviews. Interviewers who use those first few seconds to make judgments about your credibility, competence, and likability. How can they tell all of this from just those first few seconds? First, they're looking for a firm handshake. This includes eye contact and a smile. You may be nervous, but it's important to relax and show them a positive expression. Be careful not to offer a limp handshake or to look away from the interviewer when shaking their hand. A big part of first impressions is in how we dress, so we should always dress to impress. Dressing for success doesn't mean spending a lot of money. It means considering how what we wear reflects on our professional image and matches the image the company wants for its people. Remember, companies are looking to match you to their organizational culture. So, how do we show our best self to an employer? First, we need to stay professional and more formal than we would for an average day on the job. The easiest rule of thumb is to stay at least one level up from what you would wear day to day. No sneakers, jeans, t-shirts, or other clothing that doesn't demonstrate our most competent and professional style. Second, neatness is crucial. That doesn't mean you need a new and expensive suit. Instead, focus on having clothes that fit properly and aren't wrinkled or dirty. Clothes and accessories should match and not be too loud or distracting. Dangling earrings or a loud tie can distract an interviewer from your answer. Finally, it's important to consider the company's style. If you're interviewing for a company that is more casual, a three-piece suit might not be appropriate. You can still look professional by having a nice pair of slacks and a button-down shirt with loafers. Remember, your goal is to show yourself in the best light for that position. Now that you've made a great first impression, let's talk about active listening. Active listening means that you're engaging in behaviors that show that you're focused on the other person and what they have to say. This can be challenging in an interview because we spend a lot of the time trying to think of how we respond to questions. That means we may miss key information from the interviewer. Ways that we can show an interviewer that we are engaged in active listening include making a lot of eye contact with the interviewer, smiling in a relaxed way, nodding to demonstrate attention and agreement, and repeating or paraphrasing in our own words to show attention and understanding. If you struggle with listening or you receive some particularly long questions, it's okay to write down a few notes. Just be sure to look up and make regular eye contact so they aren't talking to the top of your head. Now you've got active listening down, let's look at how you should be answering questions. This is the area where most people focus their interview prep. First, let's talk about structuring your answers. There are two ways you can easily structure an answer to be concise and memorable in an interview. The first is to create a list. The second is to tell your story. Let's start by looking at lists. A list is a great way to structure an answer so that you can create a memorable impression and keep from rambling. Keep your list to 2 or 3 items to help you stay concise. When making a list, you can do something called signposting. When you signpost, you're using words like first, second, and third to help the listener follow your responses. For example, if an interviewer asks you, "Why are you interested in our organization?" you can say, "There are 3 things I love about your company. First, I think it's a great environment with exceptional people. Second, I think the new product line shows that you're an innovative company. And third, I believe that there are a lot of possibilities for growth with your team." And you've just given a simple, concise, and easy to remember answer. This is an easy skill to practice with others. Have a friend ask you questions and see how quickly you can come up with 2 or 3 things in an answer. After a while, it'll just become second nature. The second way to answer an interviewer is to share a story. Did you know that the human mind is built for stories? Stories help us remember information and keep us involved in the answer. If we hear the beginning of a story, our mind is eager to make sure that it also hears the end. This guarantees listening. Stories are also a great way to help an employer get to know you. We can make ourselves stand out and become more real as people by telling engaging stories. They also provide evidence of past experiences. The challenge is to keep your stories brief and to the point. For example, when someone asks you a question about your biggest flaw, tell them a short story about how you discovered your flaw and what you're doing to correct it. When talking about interviewing, you may have heard the term behavioral interview. It sounds a bit intimidating, but behavioral interview questions are just questions that ask about how you would behave in a given situation. They're designed to help the employer understand more about how you would act in a specific employment setting or in the face of a certain type of problem. Here are three examples of behavioral interview questions. The first is, when have you had a conflict with a team member? Conflicts come up a lot at work, so this is a great way for the interviewer to get to know when this has happened to you and what you did. Second, when did you persuade a supervisor to change their mind? Third, when have you failed at work? We all fail, so it's a great question that gets to how you deal with failure in your life. When you hear this type of question, it's okay to pause for a moment and think. For an interview question about the past, you can use a story to answer. For a question about the future, you might answer with a signposted list. If you use a story, be sure that it does not insult others or put former employers in a bad light. Companies don't want to hear you bash past coworkers or supervisors. Let's look at the question about persuading a supervisor and see if we can give an example. You might say, first, I would explore the facts to ensure I needed to persuade him or her. Then I would be sure to listen carefully to understand their reasons and why they believe the way they do. Finally, I would present my information in a way that shows why a different course of action could be of benefit. I think the key is to start with listening and understanding before trying to persuade. So you can see here, we were able to use our list format and our signposting to make our question answer concise, relative, and easy to remember. Whether you're using a list or a story, it's important to be specific. Remember that interviewers are using this time as much as possible to get to your personality and past experience. By giving them concrete answers, you increase their certainty. For example, when asked about your past performance, use numbers or specific examples that can help them quantify your success. Connect your answer back to the company's work so they can see the relevance. And be sure to demonstrate knowledge and experience when you have it. So what should we not do? It's important that you don't ever lie to an employer. Padding an interview with things that aren't true is sure to come back, and when they do more research, they'll find it. It's also important to never speak negatively in an interview. Interviewers know that if you speak poorly of another organization, you'll probably do the same to them. Finally, don't pretend to know what you don't. If you don't have experience or you don't know the answer, it's okay to share that you're unsure or that you may need to learn a new skill. We all have to learn skills from time to time. Every interview ends with this important question. Do you have any questions for us? Your answer should always be yes. Answering no says you're not particularly interested in the job or in the company. Here are a few sample questions that you could ask. What is the 5-year plan for your organization? This question shows that you have an interest in the organization itself. How did this position become available? This question allows you to find out whether this is a new position, somebody who was promoted or left the company, or if there's been a lot of turnover. What does a typical day look like in this position? This question allows you to get a sense of what your day-to-day life would be like were you to take the job. It also can bring up any kinds of challenges. Finally, it's always great to end with the simple question, when are you hoping to make a hiring decision? This is going to tell you whether or not they're at the beginning or the end of their interview process. Do they have more people to interview? Are they looking to take a couple weeks or a couple of days, or maybe even a couple of months to make a decision? And that'll help you determine how you can follow up. Here are some things you don't want to ask in the interview. Questions to avoid include how much am I getting paid? You can negotiate salary once they've offered the job, but it's not appropriate to ask in the interview itself. How many days off do I have? This shows more of an interest in not working rather than working. And questions about the dress show a concern for personal comfort rather than the company itself or the job that you'll be doing. Save those questions for when you have an offer in hand and before you start work. Now, let's conclude by understanding the best ways to follow up after a job interview. The most important follow up is the thank you letter. Traditionally, these have been sent in the mail, but with the fast paced nature of job searches today, it can be better to send them via email so you don't miss an opportunity. Be sure to get the names and email addresses for everyone that you interview with. If there was a large committee or lots of people whose names you didn't catch, it's okay to send the email to the main person with whom you've been talking and ask them to please forward it on to the others. Your letter should include gratitude for their time and investment. Restate why you think you can bring value to the organization, and restate your own enthusiasm for the position so that they know you're still interested. Letters should be brief, simple, and specific. For example, you might offer a detail that would help them remember you, like, I enjoyed our conversation about visiting Port Aransas, or I really appreciated your sharing your new vision statement. These small details can help them remember you when there are a large number of people who interviewed. Following up is crucial, but how you follow up matters a lot. First, it's important not to pester the organization. If they shared that they would make a decision in 2 weeks, it's okay to check back on week 3 and see where you stand, but don't continue to follow up over and over. It's a surefire way to annoy a potential employer. Second, if you aren't the candidate chosen, don't ask why you weren't hired. Most people aren't allowed to share that information with you, and giving you guidance isn't part of their interview practice. Accept it with grace and thank them for the opportunity. Let them know that you would still be interested if another position came open. Whatever you do, don't burn bridges by being unfriendly or unpleasant. Remember that candidates fall through all the time. You might be next in line, or you may meet this interviewer at a future time with another job. Finally, don't act like you have the job and stop your search. You should keep looking until you have a job offer successfully negotiated with a start date. Today, we've learned 3 key components of interviewing: identifying ways to prepare, understanding best practices, and how best to follow up. Now that you've completed this video, please go and complete the sample interview questions and quiz to earn your badge for this Career Builder session.